So Star Trek Picard was pretty much what I expected it to be. The first episode, Remembrance, is certainly better than the first episode of Star Trek Discovery. Not that that would be all that difficult. And I enjoyed the opening scene and seeing the Enterprise D in a dream sequence with Picard and Data, and they're playing poker and all that kind of stuff. And I think the de-aging CGI for Brent Spiner is reasonable. It's perfectly acceptable. I think it worked quite well. And Picard is in France in Chateau Picard again, and he's got these two Romulan assistants. But we've gone back to the old makeup now, to the original series makeup. So the Romulans look like Vulcans, and I'm sure that's not going to be confusing throughout the rest of this show. But what it was funny, like one of the Romulan characters is this female character. She's actually played by an actress called Orla Brady, and she's Irish, and she doesn't hide her accent. Like she actually plays this Romulan with an Irish accent, and accents like that is actually a something I want to talk about in this episode, because I know that we've had alien characters on Star Trek before portrayed with very Shakespearean or even English accents. Like you had Chang in Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country, right? And you know, Christopher Plummer plays it very arch Shakespearean, almost British, right? But for the most part, with that exception aside, for the most part on Star Trek, aliens always had that kind of arch Shakespearean quality of, I will destroy your ship, Captain. But there was always an attempt to kind of stylistically standardize the accents. But since Star Trek 2009 with Nero, you know, the characters kind of just, they kind of play it quite human. The aliens are quite human, and I don't like that. You know, you had like Nero, and he's like, hey, Christopher, I'm Nero. And it's like, oh, they're trying to kind of be funny and to be too human. And it doesn't feel alien anymore. And now we have like several characters in this show that are just too human and too contemporary. So we have this female Romulan who's, for all intents and purposes, sounds completely Irish. Now, she's got a fairly soft Irish accent, and she's like, Captain Admiral, make sure you wash your hands now, right? Make sure you go in and wash your hands. You know, it's like, I wish she had like a strong Dublin accent. You know, and she's like, get upstairs now, bring down 3 short hangers. I'm doing your ironing. I'm ironing your uniform for tomorrow. You're going back to Starfleet. You know, I just love it. It was like, did you clean out that replicator? Jean-Luc Picard, come down that stairs. The replicator's destroyed. I didn't leave that replicator like that. You go in and clean that. And then at the end, there's this alien, and he's a Romulan as well. He's this new character, and it's like, hello, I'm Romulan. You know, he's real emo English guy. He looks a lot like Spock did in Discovery. You know, emo Spock. He's like, hello, I'm Romulan, and how are you? Oh, that's a really nice necklace that you've got around your neck. I'm from Swindon. There's a Swindon in Romulans. Well, there was until we blew it up, because we're like blowing things up all the time now, aren't we? In the new Star Trek, post J.J. Abrams Star Trek, we keep blowing up Vulcan, blowing up Romulus, you know, destroy bits of Mars. We just blow shit up, don't we? You know, terrorism all the time, and yeah. I lost my brother. You know, I'm kind of oversharing with you. You're a total stranger, I know, but you know, can we maybe go for a drink? You know, I'm a bit of a creep, but I'm actually probably don't talk to me, do you? No. Guess again. Okay, so obviously I'm taking the piss here, but the crux of the scene is that this guy just, he just starts to overshare out of nothing. Again, he obsesses about the necklace, which is a thing in this episode, and then he goes on about his dead brother, because she mentions that she's a twin. And then he says, oh, we lost him last year unexpectedly. Oh, I'm sorry. You know, I know you deal with broken people every day. Presumably she I guess, works with ex-Borg drones, maybe. I don't know. And he says, the last thing that you want to hear after work is another sad story or something. And they just, guess again, this kind of thing. And nobody talks like this. Right? This is not how people who've just met engage with each other. It's not very realistic. I mean, you could argue, maybe you could make the case that the reason this woman sounds Irish, this Romulan sounds Irish, and this Romulan sounds English, is because because of the Romulan refugee crisis, they've lived for many years on Earth. I don't know. Maybe that's what they're going with. But that doesn't explain Worf. You know, Worf sounded Klingon, and he was raised on Earth in Russia by two human parents. And Worf never sounded like, hello, Captain, it is good day to die. I mean, he didn't speak like this, you know. But anyway, there was a huge emphasis in the story placed on Daj's necklace. They went on and on about this necklace, these two conjoined rings. This is supposed to be really, really important because it's a representation of this positronic neuronic cloning or some, I don't know what the hell they call it, nerdrotic cloning, as I like to call it. Right, this is how they managed to clone data. It was a fractal neuronic cloning. And they basically produced Blade Runner type synthetic humans. And there was a rescue armada back in the day that was going to be sent to try to save Romulus. And Admiral Picard at the time, which is explained in an interview that Picard does with this woman, they're talking about the supernova that engulfed Romulus. Because we're going with that, we're going with the 2009 film. Unfortunately, that's the continuity we're tied into. I don't like this at all. I think it was a terrible idea to be blowing up these planets. But apparently the Federation did not want to help the Romulans. They didn't want to help them, even though this makes no sense. And the interviewer implies that they were just Romulan lives. And Picard's like, no, not lives, not lives, And it's like, well, of course, we wanted peace between the Romulans and the Federation, and that's what the Federation wanted. In Nemesis, they specifically went to meet Shinzon to negotiate peace, right? Number one. And then at the end of the film, Riker goes off for his first mission with the Titan to as part of a peacekeeping task force to Romulus. The Romulans are interested in talking, he says. Right, this is great news. But that's all been forgotten now because the Romulans are the bad guys again, and then the Federation just didn't give a shit about them. This is so un-Federation. This is not what the Federation would ever stand for. It's a very cynical position for them to take. And this is part of the vandalization now of the Federation, to try to make them the antagonists in the story. And that's why Picard has to go rogue with this band of, it's a Firefly-type Star Trek renegades, ragtag team crew that he enlists the help of for his mission to find Daj's sister, because Daj and Soji, I believe she's called, they're clone synthetic androids. You can't distinguish between them, between a human and a synthetic, but she's actually an android, some kind of an android. And they keep going on and on and on about this necklace around her neck. That these two conjoined rings, it's like Picard's like, oh, where did you get that necklace? A very unusual necklace. You got it right. It's such a benign, boring necklace. It's like two conjoined rings. Who cares? I've seen way more elaborate necklaces on women. It's like it's nothing unusual. You go to any jewelers, and you'll find something more interesting than this boring necklace. But they keep going on about it because it's this whole idea that we can tie this really complicated story plot point to this really simple little trinket, and that's clever, but it's not. And he goes on and on and on, and it's like he takes it off her neck and he looks at it, and she tells him what it means to her, and you're kind of going, yeah, I bet this isn't a gigantic ball of foreshadowing later on. And then he, for no reason, after she gets killed, he shows this to Jurati, right, in the Daystrom Institute in Okinawa. And for no reason, he has no reason to show her this necklace, but to further the plot and for her to continue explaining the exposition. And this episode is very exposition heavy, which by itself isn't a real problem, but there's a lot to get out. And then she goes on about this fractal nerdrotic cloning, and it's just the dumbest thing. It's the dumbest thing you've ever heard in your life, because apparently Maddox, right? Maddox from the second season of Next Gen, the episode The Measure of a Man. Bruce Maddox is back, and he's been working on making these synthetic Blade Runner, basically, replicants, basically. And he must have used some essence of data, some piece of his positronic net. And apparently you can use, she says it's this beautiful idea that you can use one piece of the positronic brain, and you can use that to recreate the entire person, all of data and all his memories. It's just literally the stupidest thing you've ever heard, because it's like saying, I could clone you if I just had one piece of your brain. Not the part of your brain that necessarily has any of your memories in it or whatever. I mean, it's just, you could just take any piece of brain tissue and you could rebuild the person completely with all their memories intact. It's like the idea of cloning someone. You take a piece of their hair, You put it in a cloning machine or something, and it clones the person perfectly in exact detail. I mean, sure, you could recreate their body, but you're not going to recreate their memories. If that's the case, and you can recreate Data's consciousness and all his memories from one tiny bit of his positronic brain, then what was the point of the rest of his positronic brain, right? Cloning does not recreate the memories of a person. And this idea that we can create human synthetic clones from artificial, like from machines, from artificial life forms, is just bafflingly dumb. This is a level of suspension of disbelief I can't go to. And apparently, because of the attack on Mars that was carried out by these rogue synthetics, apparently this has led to an outright ban on all synthetic life, right? So this is why B4, for example, B4 has to be shut down. And we're told that the memory transfer in Nemesis from Data to B4 was not fully successful. Eventually the memories faded. B4 he wasn't sophisticated enough to process Data's consciousness or whatever, his katra. And which I'm kind of glad about, because that was kind of a rip-off of that at the end when he starts to sing Blue Skies at the end of Nemesis. That was kind of a rip-off of that episode where they reset the EMH and he starts singing at the end, and I thought they were kind of repeating themselves. And so this story does not directly follow on from the Captain Data of the Countdown comics, so it's a little bit of a departure there. So Data stayed dead and B4 got shut down, and but you're kind of going, you've got a ban on synthetics. What about holograms? Like that, there was a hologram in the story. So is the EMH, is Robert Picardo's character, is he gone now? Is seriously, why just androids? You know what I mean? So also there was a bit in it that drove me insane, which was, and you might say I'm being really pedantic here, but actually this is important, and it's important because there's a scene where Jurati shows Picard B4, and she says, so the memories didn't take or whatever, she explains. And that B4 was, she says that he was an inferior copy. And I just, you face palm so hard when you hear this kind of stuff, because you're kind of going, do they not know why the character was called B4? I mean, this was explained in Nemesis. This is painful to any Star Trek fan for them to say something like this. Geordi explained that B4, originally called Benign in the original script apparently, but B4, I mean, the hint is in the name, okay? He was a prototype, an early prototype of Data, something that Dr. Soong created before Data. He explains this, B4, right? And Picard says something about Dr. Soong's penchant for whimsical names. I mean, do the writers of this show, do they not get this? Do they not understand? Do they think that there was a B1 and a B2 and a B3 and a B5 and a B6 or something? Oh, now I get it. B4, as in before. Because this is important, because Data and Lore were the copies, right? And this is the other thing. They keep going on about there was no one like Data. There was no one like Data. There's been no one like Data. And it's like, so it's one of two things. Either they're trying to make you forget about Lore, and he's going to appear later in the story, maybe. I don't know. I could be completely way off base. Or they've forgotten, right? Either they're trying to make you forget about Lore, or they've forgotten about Lore. Which is it? I don't know which it is. And that's the really painful thing, because I could just foresee this scene down the line in some future episode where Picard goes to meet Maddox. And let me just use sophisticated CGI to age Maddox. and Picard goes to meet him, and he's like, Maddox, what have you unleashed? This woman is dangerous. She's killing everything. And the Romulans, the synthetics, it's going to be war. It's saving the future of the universe. Right, there's going to be something where Maddox is like, but I didn't know. We only wanted to create new life. You cut corners. What did you do? And there's something like unethical or some aspect of this where Maddox has regret. Again, I could be totally wrong. I'm just making this up as I go along here. And Maddox is like, we didn't know. We didn't know it was going to happen. You must help me. We must put a stop to this. Blah, 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 blah. Your creation has gone insane. Blah, Frankenstein type stuff, He's lost control of the monster. And then Maddox will turn around and say, well, yeah, I'll do what I can to help you. And then I'm like, how did you get your hands on Data's positronic whatever? And then he's like, what? How did you clone? You obviously used Data as a template to clone these two daughters of Data, right? And he's like, but Picard, you're mistaken. We didn't use Data. Of course you used Data. We didn't use Data. Of course. Who else could you have used? There's only one android like Data who's as intelligent as Data. There's only ever been one. I can't possibly think of any other android I've ever met who is as intelligent as Data.
Law. Right.
Right? And then Maddox will just say, but Picard, we didn't use Data. We used lore. Law! Dun dun dun, to be continued. Right? This is the kind of, like, again, I don't know if that's going to happen. Right? I don't know. But it's just so painfully predictable. Like, for example, I was thinking, if I went on a live stream with Robert Meyer Burnett and Gary from Nerdrotic and Geeks and Gamers and Mecha Random and Midnight's Edge, and we just sat around and did a round table and just started to guess what they're going to do and what the plot development, how the plot's going to develop and all the twists and turns, we could probably, within a margin for error, we'd eventually hit upon a theory that explained probably the entire plot of Star Trek Picard. There's only so many ways that this story can go. And now that I know that these two girls are Data's daughters, I don't really care to know all that much more. The plot hasn't sufficiently gripped me that I really care, because it's just so predictable what they're going to do next. And there's only so many ways that they can go. Picard would be like, my law, how did I forget? I must have Eromotic syndrome. I keep forgetting to wash my hands. This woman keeps telling me to wash my hands. And clean out that replicator. Did you make your bed? Did you change the sheets? Wash your hands after handling that dog. Right. I just don't know. It's not even a bad episode. You know, I'm just ripping the piss out of it for the sake of it. There was one other thing that kind of annoyed me. There's a scene, one of the early scenes with Daj and her boyfriend before the Romulans come in and try and take her. And they're like, this weird fight where they're like, she's activating or something, right? All these features within her start to activate when she's under attack or something. So she just suddenly has this ability to beat guys up and doesn't know where it comes from. And she kills them all. But before that, she's sitting there having wine with her boyfriend. And they're speaking in a very contemporary way, like the way young millennials would today in the 21st century. But this is like the late 24th, early 25th century or whatever. But why are they acting like young people do today? I mean, this is the thing, the temperament, the disposition, the way they speak, the way they express themselves, the kind of words they use, for some reason, they sound no different to characters from any other television show that's based today, that's based in the 21st century. I just find it very odd. And she's like, I got accepted into Daystrom. And it's like, oh my God. And she's like, dude, she's apparently an expert in artificial intelligence and quantum consciousness, because we got to throw in the word quantum as often as possible to sound smart, right? Because that's what you do when you don't understand the science of Star Trek, and you just think it's magic. It's like the mycelial network. They don't really understand that Star Trek at least tried to maintain some kind of believable future science. Now that the current custodians of the Star Trek franchise kind of see the science of Star Trek as it's kind of magic. I mean, it doesn't really mean anything. It's just meaningless words that, we just say some stuff and it serves the plot and we get to do all sorts of ridiculous things. It's like, the red signals or whatever in the second season of Discovery. They happened it started to appear all over the galaxy at once. How would you know this? How could you possibly know, given the massive distances between things? You could only know this if you could see the galaxy from above, the entire thing. It's so silly, it doesn't make any sense. It's just strange. So she's talking away and she's talking to her boyfriend and she uses the word dude, right? Which I don't think anyone in the 24th century, we've ever heard them speak this way, in Deep Space Nine and Next Gen and Voyager, these people were pretty down to earth, but they were certainly not of our age. They did not use contemporary slang and colloquialisms and that kind of thing. The vernacular was a little bit different. It was a little bit removed from us. The closest you might get was somebody like Tom Paris, because he was a bit of an anachronism. You know, he was an aficionado on all things 20th and 21st century. And then in the 22nd century, in Archer's timeline, the NX-01 crew were much closer in their speech and behavior and how they expressed themselves to our time. And they were supposed to be. They were a lot closer to us. They were supposed to be more accessible to a general audience. But I don't know why now, in the 25th century, young characters are now speaking the way 21st century millennials speak. Considering we've never, throughout the entirety of the next generation, nobody spoke like this. I just think it's interesting, you know? They have a millennial kind of way of speaking, which is designed to kind of reach out to that audience. And I don't really like that, because Star Trek has never needed to pander in that way. And the guy's like, oh, that's so cool. And he's really effeminate. He's another hipster, right? Her boyfriend is just a hipster. You're an alien. Why do you sound like a human male hipster from the 21st century? All right. And then he goes over to her replicator. Is like, oh, your replicator selections or whatever, your replicator menu is like tragic, vanilla, oh my God. It's like, it's you're an alien, dude. You're an alien. Why are you speaking and behaving very, 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 very human? He sounds so of this century, of our time, of this decade, you know? And then she's only short of saying something like, are you on WhatsApp? I want to send you this TikTok video of this girl. Her eyes are just so on fleek right now. Oh, yes, queen. I mean, it's just, they're only short of speaking like this. And there was actually one other really stupid thing in the episode. After the big explosion that kills Daj, right? Picard wakes up and he's on his couch back in Chateau Picard. So one minute he was on the other side of the planet, and the next minute he wakes up and he's on his couch, and his two assistants, the two Romulan assistants, are there, including the Irish Romulan lady. And he's like, am I okay? And all this kind of stuff. And the weird thing is they focus on what happened on the roof, right? As opposed to, Picard, what's the last thing you remember? What were you doing on the roof? And all this kind of stuff. None of these questions are asked. You know, he starts to explain, Daj, she's dead. She was attacked by Romulans. And then they're like, but what would happen in a real situation is that some sort of law enforcement Picard would be brought to hospital, and he'd be questioned by the law enforcement in hospital, right? But that's not what happened. He's just suddenly back on his couch in France again. It's strange. No police around him or anything. And then they're like, we didn't see any other woman. You know, we didn't see her on the security feed, right? She must have, and then they say she must have had a cloaking device. What? That must be the reason. But yes, it must have activated when she was in danger. What kind of an android is this? She's got a built-in cloaking device, but it's the weirdest cloaking device in the history of cloaking devices, right? Very elaborate. Apparently this cloaking device allows her to be invisible selectively, okay? She doesn't show up on security feeds, but Picard could see her, and the Romulans could see her, we could see her, but apparently she's invisible. What am I watching? What the hell is that about? Just the strangest thing. I honestly, it was some of the writing is very, very weak, and it's not very well thought through. And I honestly don't think the B4 thing is a classic example. I don't really think that this show is in any way being written by people who are really intimately familiar with Star Trek. I just don't think they know the lore well enough, and it doesn't. The show does not feel like Star Trek. The first episode's not bad. It's just there's a lot of things that are kind of weak and a little silly and very un-Star Trek. This is not a show about boldly going where no man has gone before. It's not about space exploration. It's not about the utopian vision of the Federation, which is, let's be honest, that's what makes Star Trek Star Trek. You may disagree with that utopian vision. You may say that it's idealistic and naive and unrealistic, and it may be all those things. In fact, the Federation may as well be a gigantic European Union or United Nations or something. But there was at least some understanding that in the future, the worst aspects of humanity, that we'd overcome them and that we'd evolved. Not that we would ever evolve in 300 or 400 years so quickly or anything like that. That was never realistic. But that the future was an optimistic one. And now we have these stories that are being written to speak to our time. You know, it's the same thing as I've mentioned before with Star Wars with The Last Jedi, with Luke Skywalker living alone as a hermit, very unhappy, very broken and cynical on an island somewhere, after his happiness, after his best days. All our best days are behind us. Everyone's unhappy. You know, the broken, jaded man in the broken, jaded world. You know, Han and Leia are separated. They used to be happy. The Return of the Jedi ended happy for everybody, but now we're in a post-happiness world. All right, and this is relatable to a generation of young people mired in nihilism and narcissism, and so everyone wants to feel special, a special snowflake. We live in this time of victim culture, and victim culture is useful if you want to feel like a special snowflake, right? And that's why you're a special snowflake, but you don't even realize how amazing you are. And that's why we have these stories about a character who doesn't realize how incredible they are inside, that they're amazing inside, you know, this kind of thing. And it's all very emotional, and it's not very intellectual. You know, the clever stories are giving way to vacuous, emotional stories that are designed to resonate and on an emotional level purely, but not at a philosophical or intellectual level. And I think that's the reason why the science is now so dumbed down, you know, because it's just pandering. And it's not good. I don't think it's good for our culture that this has happened. This is the problem. You know, we're dealing with a generation that feels hopeless, you know, that believes that life is meaningless kind of thing, you know. And I just feel that has factored, that mindset, that irony and cynicism has wormed its way into the cultural zeitgeist and what Hollywood is producing. And you know, the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves that make our culture and our pop culture are reflective of how people feel. You know, the individual who doesn't even realize how amazing they are. This is why Michael Burnham is such a Mary Sue. It's like that scene in The Red Angel when Pike says, "We're saying that Michael, our Michael Burnham, is going to wake up one day, access time travel technology that doesn't exist yet, and take it upon herself to save the galaxy. That supposition rather fits her emotional profile rather precisely, particularly her drive to take responsibility for situations beyond her control." And she's going to be like a messianic figure who flies an Iron Man suit through a black hole or some temporal thing, whatever. And the Enterprise, the Discovery follows her close behind because she's the key to saving the universe. And then in the future, she's going to be the key to saving the Federation, right? Because this is what she is. And it's all about the individual and individual narcissism. Anyway, Star Trek Picard's first episode, I've nitpicked it to shit, and I'm sure many of you will be very unhappy with that. If you enjoy this episode, genuinely, I feel, you know, I'm happy for you. I'm happy for you. I enjoyed it the first time I watched it, actually. But I watched it twice in the same day, and the second time I was like, oh, hang on. There's some really dumb stuff in here. You know, but what sells it is the high production values, some good effects. I know that's window dressing, but and Patrick Stewart. You know, you may not agree with his politics, but he just puts in a fantastic performance as Picard. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I'm going to continue to watch it. Maybe it'll improve, but I just feel, I think we can kind of predict what's going to happen. We can kind of predict where they're going to go with the introduction of the Borg and what they're about. I can kind of see where they're going with it. I could be wrong by mid-season. I could be way off base, but I just didn't think that the story was original enough. I mean, it's just lacking creatively, you know? Let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.